Hey y'all, thank you for joining me on another video. Um, there's some things that's going on that I want to talk about, but I can't at the moment because there's nothing solidified yet. But there's some good things going on in the background, y'all. And maybe even by next week, next video, I might have some good news. I want to talk about it so bad, but I can't at the moment. So, y'all are praying types, please pray. Because, ooh, it looks so promising. But today, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about. And I started a new Bible study, group Bible study, um, about overcoming abusive relationships. And I was reviewing over the lesson that we just had, and it talked about bitterness. And that kind of got me to thinking about forgiveness. And so that's what I want to talk about today because, y'all, forgiveness is so misunderstood. When people think about forgiveness, they think that, okay, I forgave that person, so I don't bring up what they did anymore. I trust them. I act like nothing happened. Basically, wiping the slate clean. No, that's not what forgiveness means. Now, some instances you can do that. Some instances um, where what was done that needed forgiveness, I'm trying to think how to word it, that what was done that needed forgiveness was minor, you can get to the point to where you can put all of that behind you and move forward on a clean slate. But not when it comes to abuse and trauma. Um, where that's concerned, it's a whole different ball of wax. Um, like as I've stated in previous videos, for my birthday present to myself in August of 2020, uh, several months after everything went down, um, I, with Christ in me, I was able to forgive my ex. However, that doesn't mean that I will ever trust him again, because I won't. Um, it also doesn't mean that I'll ever even consider the thought of taking him back. I don't normally like to speak in definitive terms, um, mainly because you never know. You know, the old expression, never say never. But in this instance, I can speak with all certainty and definitiveness and say that I'm not taking him back. Just because I've forgiven him, that doesn't mean I'm going to take him back. Never. Um, there's been too much trauma, too much damage, too many things that um, can never be gotten past. Trust has been totally annihilated. Um, I mean, he abused our kids. Well, something fierce. And, even with my kids, um, there's that stands in the way because I allowed it. And yeah, I was going through trauma myself, but I still allowed it. And you know, I'm working on that. And, but there's just too much abuse and damage for me to ever consider even the minuscule amount of possibility of taking him back. Because any trust that was there has been annihilated, non existent. And I don't see it that it could ever be gotten back. I mean, all things are possible with God, but there's just, I'm not limiting God, but it's just, there's nothing, there's some things you just can't get past. And that's what it is between he and he and the kids. So forgiveness doesn't mean any of that I'll take him back or anything like that. What it does mean is that I've let go of the bitterness. Yeah, there's times that something will happen or a memory will come up that'll get me angry at him all over again. Especially with a memory, because I'm still dealing with memories that I've forgotten, that were either repressed or just simply, forgotten. And when those memories come up, oh man, they're brutal. Like the most recent one that I told y'all about that I had in a video. The most brutal memory to date. And man, I was dealing with bitterness all over again. Because this memory was like way out there. My therapist even has strong reactions to it. And this is a man that is a veteran. And I think if I remember, he was in Iraq for a while. So he has that experience. And he works as a chaplain. So he's seen a lot in the chaplaincy alone. And he's a therapist, and he's been a therapist for quite a while. So he's seen a lot, and he had strong reactions to this latest memory. And I had to do a lot of work and praying to let go of that bitterness, because I was grabbing onto that bitterness again. Because I was like, oh my gosh, I struggling with despising him. And it's hard, especially when these memories come up and seem to like blindside you. That's when it's really hard. Or I would struggle with bitterness with, like, one of the few things he ever did for me, I live on a third floor, so, and I don't have a washer and dryer in my apartment. So I have to lug um, totes of laundry down the stairs, do the laundry, and then lug them back up. Well, he would at least bring the laundry down for me and then bring it back up. And so, especially the first few months when I had to do it myself, now my youngest lives with me and he's a huge help. And he will help me um, transport the laundry. But, there's times he was working and so he couldn't, and I needed to do laundry because I didn't have any clean clothes to wear. So I had to figure it out and drag the laundry downstairs and figure out a way to get it back upstairs. And during those times, those first couple of times I had to do that, I called him everything but a child of God. I'll admit it. But I was able to get past that because I asked God, please just help me let go of this bitterness. You call me to forgive, help me forgive. And then God showed me, if he can forgive me in all of my transgressions, of which there are many, why can't I forgive my ex? That stung when I came to that realization, because it's like I wanted to hold on to that bitterness, that hatred, because he deserved it, which he did. I mean, but I deserve God's hatred. And that, like, ouch moment. Because it was like, yeah. I mean, what he did was irreparable. Unconscionable. The abuse that my kids endured while they were still living here with us, and then the abuse I endured even after they were gone. They moved out on their own, the two older ones. And it's understandable that there's hatred, in the case of a person despising their abuser. Absolutely normal. It's perfectly normal, perfectly understandable. In fact, I kind of wonder if in talking to an abuser that they didn't have some sort of hatred for their abuser, talking to an abused person. But it doesn't mean you hold on to it. It's a daily process, especially when new memories come up or traumaversaries come up, and within the traumaversary, more memories pop up within that, or you remember more and more details start coming up. It's difficult. And I'm not going to sit here and lie and say it's easy. Because it's not. Oh my goodness, there are some days that I just want to go punch him because of witnessing the after effects of his abuse, either witnessing it in my own life or witnessing it in my kids' lives. Um, and that's such a big misconception that people think, well, no, I'm not going to forgive my abuser, or because um, that means I have to let go of everything, and I can't. Or not let go of everything. That means that I have to forget everything. Forgiveness does not mean forgetfulness. I will never forget what he did. Trust me, I would like to. I would like to be able to forget all the damage that he's done to my kids and to me. Um, I'd like to forget all of that ever existed and just move on with my life. But I can't. It's just pretty much impossible. And again, it doesn't mean that in forgiveness I take him back, because that's never going to happen. What does it mean? Like I stated, it means stay away from the bitterness. Let go of the bitterness, not harbor the resentment. Yeah, there's going to be resentment. There's always going to be resentment of some sort that's going to pop up here and there. It may eventually lessen, but it's still going to happen. It's still going to pop up. That's a given. But what it means is little things like, I don't wish harm on him most days. There are days that, yeah, I do wish harm on him. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to pretend I'm walking a straight, narrow path, perfect path. Not this old gal. But as a whole, it means that I'm not going to hang on to that bitterness most days. I am not going to wish harm on him most days. God is dealing with him in other ways and allowing me to see it. So he's getting his. And I just sit back and God lets me see it. It means that, heaven forbid, if he's walking across the street and gets hit by a car and I happen to be right there and witness it, I'm going to get out, call 911, and perform first aid and do what I can until first responders come. And that includes doing CPR if it came to that. Would I want to in my flesh? No. In my flesh, it wouldn't bother me. I'm going to be totally, brutally honest. But that's not what God calls me to do. God calls me to do what I need to do, render first aid, including CPR, if I have to. But then once the ambulance comes, EMTs, police, or whatever, once they come and get my statement and my information, and they say I'm free to go, I'm going to get my happy butt back into my van and drive off. I may even inquire about him through some people that we still know together. But I'm not going to take care of him. Like if he needs to be taken care of and can't be by himself, I'm not going to take care of him. I'm going to let him figure it out. Whatever needs to be done. God says if your enemy needs a drink, you give him a cup of water. I'm paraphrasing. And that's exactly what I'll do. But it doesn't mean I'm going to take him back. It doesn't mean that I'm going to have any kind of relationship with him even. I don't need to have any relationship with him. Our children are grown and on their own. So there's no need to ever contact him again. So I'm not going to, even attempt to have a relationship with him. But I'm not going to let that bitterness harbor and fester. Because you're not, by harboring that bitterness, you're not hurting them as much as you're hurting yourself. Because that bitterness festers. Just like a sore that gets infected, and if you don't let that sore drain, and if you don't clean it and let it drain of all that nastiness, it'll get worse. And next thing you know, if you don't take care of it at all, you're losing a limb or wherever that sore was. That's what bitterness does. When you hold on to bitterness and don't deal with it, it's like a disease. And it'll get into every ounce of your heart. And you're allowing it to rule your life. And that's not good. And that's what I was doing. 'Cause I was holding on to that bitterness. And it was affecting me. It was making me angrier and angrier. Holding on to things that I had no more control over. Holding on to things that were not really relevant any longer. Because we're not together. Because we are divorced. Because, he's not around at all to abuse me or anyone else, in my family. So I was still giving him power. And that's what bitterness and unforgiveness does, is you're allowing that person to still have power over you. Because you still have that anger and that resentment and that hatred. Not to say that they don't deserve the anger and the hatred. They absolutely do. But when it poisons your life, when it gets to the point that that's all you're focusing on is all the damage that the abuser's done, all the pain, the hurt, the turmoil, when you focus on all of that, it can lead to other things. It can lead to drug use because you're self medicating. It could lead to alcoholism because you're self medicating. Because you want to just forget about it, and that's a way of forgetting about it, or coping. And as any recovering drug abuser can tell you, it's not a place to be. You know, when it doesn't help, it only makes things worse. It can affect the good relationships you are in. I mean, I've been blessed that I have not ever turned to drugs or alcohol. I don't know how I was able to avoid it, because trust me, I've gone through some. I've My life has not always been the best. But I've talked to others that have recovered, and it's not an easy thing to do, and it only adds to the problems. I don't sit here and judge those that have turned to that simply because I have no reason. I'm in no position to judge anybody. I feel bad for them. And it sounds like I'm condescending, but I'm not. I know that by the grace of God, there go I. Bitterness causes way more problems than it ever solves. It adds to things. It doesn't mean you have a right to not, or it doesn't mean that you should not be angry at the abuser. Absolutely be angry. You have every right to be angry. To this day, I'm still angry with him over what he did to my kids and to me. But the difference is I don't let it run my life. I don't let it occupy even a majority of my life, or even part of my life. There are days that I struggle and I'm like, oh my gosh, he did this, he did that, I despise him, and I let myself have these feelings because they're absolutely normal and they're absolutely valid. But when you hold on to them and let them run your life, that creates turmoil. And that's why I'm saying now, talking about this, because there was a time that I was getting close to that. It's been 2 years since everything happened, and by the grace of God, I have come far. But I had to let go, and I didn't want to, because I felt, well, he doesn't deserve my forgiveness. I don't want to ever forget what he did. Well, like I said earlier in the video, there's no way I could ever forget what he did. That's not happening. Some days I wish I could, but I'm not going to ever forget what he did. And it's not going to change him. Any changes that may happen with him will happen because he chooses to make changes or to allow changes. It will have nothing to do with me or with holding any resentment or anger or bitterness or any of that. And it's not about me. It's about him making changes on his own, if he makes any changes. I have no control over that. I have no power over that. Just like nobody has the power over me to make me change. Any changes I make is because I choose to make them, and I take my hands off and say, okay, God, change me. Are there times that I try to put my hand back on that wheel and say, okay, God, I got it? Yeah, absolutely. But then God reminds me, did you not let me take over? Yeah. So just remember that forgiveness doesn't mean that you let them back into your lives in any way, shape, or form. You can forgive an abuser and not ever have a relationship with them again. In fact, a lot of times that's wise to not have a relationship with them again. It just means that you let go of your part. You let go of the bitterness, the anger, and you move forward. Because when you don't forgive and you don't let go of all of that, you can't move forward because you're still holding on to the past. And if you've moved on from that and you're out of that relationship, if, you know, you have a totally different life, if you hold on to that bitterness, then you're still holding on to some of that past. And that's not going to go well for healing. So you guys have a great week. As always, like, subscribe, share, and y'all have a blessed week. Stay safe.